Okay, superhero movies are awesome. And from what I've heard through word of mouth on YouTube, there are a lot of people who are upset with how DC movies are today. Batman v Superman, Man of Steel, Justice League, Green Lantern. People have had a lot of problems with those movies. And although I don't view those movies as the worst thing that's ever happened or as horrendous as the internet says that they are, I did like them, but not as much as some of the older movies. And in this video, I'm going to give my top 10 list of DC storylines that Warner Brothers should make into movies. Ready? Here we go. Sins of Youth. Well, it would basically be an adaptation of the Young Justice storyline, Sins of Youth. It would start with Clarion in Act 1 preparing for his evil plan, and he would complete his evil plan at the end of Act 1, turning the adults into either kids or teenagers, and turning the sidekicks, who are either kids or teenagers, into adults. The entirety of Act 2 will basically be age-swapped heroes and their sidekicks fighting their age-swapped rogues gallery. And when we get to Act 3, that essentially would be where they continue to fight age-swapped, aka younger supervillains, until they eventually have to fight Clarion the Witch Boy. And I would have it that they have to fight a bunch of supernatural villains made younger until they eventually fight Clarion the Witch Boy, defeat him at the end of the movie, and break the spell, returning everyone to their proper age. J.L. Ape. Like so many of the others on this list, this hypothetical superhero movie would follow a 3-act structure. Okay, so Act 1 would basically be the Justice League becoming aware that Gorilla Grodd is up to something, and them hunting him down, but by the time Act 1 comes to an end, Grodd will already have begun his plan and will be turning the population of planet Earth into apes in small doses. Act 2 would be the Justice League essentially just fighting off everything that Grodd's done. They're fighting supervillains turned into apes and or things that Gorilla Grodd created to stall them until the Justice League are inevitably turned into apes at the end of Act 2. And Act 3 would basically be them fighting their way to Gorilla Grodd, beating him down, and then turning everything back to normal. That's how I do it. DC 1 million. Okay, so I did not read this one. I only read the Batman annuals, but this hypothetical superhero film should definitely be an adaptation of the story presented in the 4 DC 1 million comic books. DC 1 million issues 1 through 4. Maybe it could work under a 3-act structure. Act 1 being an adaptation of DC 1 million issues 1 and 2. The second act essentially taking a break from DC 1 million and the Creeper Starman, sidekick characters such as Superboy, Robin, and Impulse, aka Kid Flash. Like I said, there's no 3-act structure. Instead, for instance, first we would see how Batman doesn't exactly want to work with Deadshot. And as long as they save Zoe, nothing else matters as long as they don't kill anybody. Through Wonder Woman's point of view, we'd see how she has an extreme hatred towards Deadshot, but she's willing to work with him to save Zoe. I'm sure she would use the lasso on him. But we get the real conflict with Superman. Now, working with an assassin is something Superman would normally, and questioning that might essentially send the Big Blue Boy Scout on the path he took in the Justice Lord universe. But it would end with Cobra attacking this high-class party, and Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman forever evil. And this one would actually follow a 4-act structure. And ironically enough, I would have the Justice League taken out in Act 1. 1. The Justice League are taken down. 2. The crime syndicate show up on TV to declare their reign over the earth, and they would unmask Nightwing as Dick Grayson, just like they did in the comics. 3. We would get Ultraman's flashback to get his origin story. 4. We would get Owlman's flashback to get his origin story. And 5, it would be revealed that Batman escaped and is now on his way to the Batcave to get some contingency plans to stop the crime syndicate. Act 2 would essentially be an adaptation of Forever Evil Arkham War, where Bane pretty much steps in as the temporary Batman and battles the Scarecrow, with the One Talon as his Robin, and you could probably say Penguin would be his Alfred, but he would bring down the Scarecrow, just like he did in Forever Evil Arkham War. Act 3 would be Batman assembling a temporary Justice League out of Lex Luthor, Catwoman, Captain Cold, Bizarro, Black Adam, and Sinestro. And Act 4 would be an adaptation of Forever Evil issues 5 through 7. And one more thing. Throughout the movie, we'd see the events of Forever Evil play out from the point of view of characters such as Two-Face, General Zod, Deathstroke, Reverse Flash, Count Vertigo, and Deadshot. Darkseid War. Like a lot on this list, this hypothetical superhero movie will follow the typical 3-act structure, with Act 1 being an adaptation of Justice League issues 40, 41, and 42, with it ending where Batman sits on the Mobius chair and becomes the new god of knowledge. Act 2 would be an adaptation of the tie-ins where the Justice League become the new gods of Apocalypse. And the third and final act would be an adaptation of Justice League issues 49 and 50, which would show the Justice League returning to normal, defeating Darkseid, and Darkseid being turned back into a baby. The next hypothetical film on this list would be an adaptation of the Superman-Batman storyline, Sorcerer Kings. The film would open up with the Sorcerer Kings having captured Lois Lane. Superman flies in to try and rescue her and ends up getting killed, as he did in the comic. Then Batman would travel back in time to 2 weeks before the Sorcerer Kings took over the world, and capture Superman to bring him back to the future to help the new Justice League defeat the Sorcerer Kings. When Superman asks future Batman how this whole world happens, Batman will tell him how the Sorcerer Kings tried. They sacrificed the sun to try and throw Earth into eternal darkness. But then DC's magically empowered superheroes sacrificed themselves in a ritual to create a new sun. This new mystically empowered Justice League would fight the Sorcerer King's minions. We'd see Superman use his new powers, including the magic sword. We'd see Batman summon the now dragon Batwing during that fight. The new Justice League would eventually fight the Sorcerer Kings themselves. Edragon the Demon would rip apart Morgan Le Fay, but before he does, and the Justice League would stop them, preventing that future from ever happening. Coming in at the number 3 slot is JLA Rock of Ages. Like a lot, or by a lot, most of the hypothetical superhero movies on this list, this movie would follow the typical 3-act structure. Act 1 would begin with the appearance of the Injustice Gang, and they would fight the Justice League, and the Justice League would defeat them at the end of Act 1. Act 2 would begin 15 years later in a potential future where Darkseid has taken over Earth, where Batman, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, the Flash, and whoever else remains of the Justice League is acting as the Resistance. Batman and Darkseid would have their final showdown, and that's where Act 2 would end. And Act 3 would be a fight between the Justice League and the Injustice Gang, which would end in a victory for the Justice League. They'd take the Rock of Ages away from Lex Luthor, and Lex Luthor would shut down the Injustice Gang, seeing it as a failure. And unlike the comic, this movie would not end with the decision to end the Justice League. They would just look at this as another mission accomplished. The two-part storyline from Superman Batman titled Mashup. This hypothetical superhero movie would follow the typical three-act structure. Act 1 is Batman and Superman appearing in Gothtropolis. I'm pretty sure that's what it was called. And they'd fight the police, who assume that Batman and Superman are some kind of threat or something. But they would escape, and then they'd have their big fight with the Justice Titans in Act 2. The Justice League. Act 2 would have Batman and Superman exploring this new city, trying to figure out what happened. They'd fight the Justice Titans. They'd beat them, say, listen, we're not a threat, and tell them about their situation. And then they'd go to the Justice Tower to try and find a way to send Batman and Superman home. Act 3 would have Batman, Superman, and the Justice Titans fight the Brotherhood of Evil, and during the fight, Batman would make the connection that none of this is real, it's all a dream. Dr. Destiny would then reveal himself, and as a last-ditch effort, he would send Batman and Superman into two different dreams as the means of trying to bring them down. Batman would escape the dream he's trapped in. Superman would escape the dream he was trapped in. And the movie would end with an adaptation of the ending of Superman Batman issue 61, where Bruce Wayne gives a donation to Arkham Asylum in exchange for keeping Dr. Destiny tranquilized for a very long time. Dark Knight's Medal. Yeah, like the majority of hypothetical superhero movies on this list, this one would follow a 3-act structure. Act 1 would begin with an adaptation of Dark Days, The Forge, with the Justice League chasing Batman to the temple where the Court of Owls are waiting for them, but it's a trap, and the Dark Knights would emerge within the first 3 minutes of the movie. And we'd see Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman sealed up in the dark multiverse. And up until the end of Act 1, we would get narration followed by flashback scenes that would give us the origin stories of the Dark Knights and how their worlds went to pieces and how they were recruited by either the Batman Who Laughs and or Barbados. Or Barbados, however you say his name. Act 2 would essentially be both an adaptation of the Gotham Resistance tie-in and the Bats Out of Hell tie-in, which would see Green Arrow, Green Lantern, Flash, Teen Titans, the rest of the Justice League, and the Suicide Squad fighting the Dark Knights and the Arkham Rogues. Well, first they'd fight the Arkham Rogues, then the Dark Knights. Okay, Act 3 would open up with Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman trapped inside the dark multiverse as the Nightmare Supermen are keeping them from leaving. They drained Superman's powers, but in this version they would also be draining Wonder Woman's too. They said that they were using Superman as a battery, so I don't see why they wouldn't do the same for Wonder Woman, because she has superpowers even though they're magic-based. But then Batman breaks free and Batman would use the gauntlet with the multicolored kryptonite to escape. He'd grab Superman. Dream would show up and teleport Batman and Superman out like he did in the comic. The rest of Act 3 would include the Justice League building up their own Batman team using different Batmen from different universes, the Joker Dragon, Batman getting the 10th medal, the fight where Batman teams up with the Joker to defeat the Batman Who Laughs, the Justice League using the 10th medal to defeat Barbados or whatever he's called, the fall of the Dark Knights, and at the end, Bruce Wayne would tell the rest of the League members that there's more to come, and he'd reveal the blueprints for the Hall of Justice.